Rightio, there's not much around today, so let's do something a bit different. Yeah. Oh, that's better. Good morning, it's the 9th of May 2023. Just wanted to give a very quick book review, or not book review, a recommendation, which is this book, A Place Like No Other by Anthony Sinclair. It's a book about the Serengeti, so a very particular kind of system and the conservation biology of a very particular system, but it's very relevant to rewilding in general. Obviously we don't have savanna systems in northwestern Europe, but even so, the broad principles that Tony Sinclair has kind of researched in the Serengeti are directly relevant to, in broad terms, trophic rewilding in particular, and he does actually have a chapter in here at the end on the implications of what he found in the Serengeti for wider rewilding. So really good book on broader conservation science principles. It's written for a broad audience, so it's you won't find much kind of statistical type visualization of data in here. There are a few graphs and charts and maps, but it's just a really lovely read. Just in terms of what Tony covers in this book, it's one of a series of books he's written on the Serengeti, and I'll link to those in the description and also a link to this particular book. So in terms of what Tony covers, so why the Serengeti, just a broad introduction to the Serengeti ecosystem. First, or the second chapter is about rinderpest, so about disease ecology in that particular system. Then a broad introduction to population regulation. Then another chapter on food regulation, which is essentially bottom-up regulation of animal populations, large animal populations in particular. Then he goes on to consider top-down regulation, so how predators regulate their prey. Then he looks at migration of large grazing ungulates and predators, how the predators kind of track the ungulates across landscapes as they migrate across kind of a vast region. That's fascinating. Then he looks at the idea of how having, how the amount of biodiversity in a region regulates the ecosystem. So the importance of species richness and diversity in the functioning and regulation of ecosystems. Then disturbance, ecological disturbance in natural ecosystems, and also human disturbances. It's a really good chapter. Then he considers continuous change in ecosystems, the fact that ecosystems aren't stable over long periods of time, and sometimes over shorter periods of time. They're subject to natural change and anthropogenic change as well. And he considers multiple stable states and rapid regime shifts in ecosystems. And then towards the end of the book he considers threats. Then he draws all of that kind of information together to discuss the broader ecological conservation science lessons that the Serengeti can provide for wider conservation biology and conservation efforts. And the very final chapter is all about rewilding, which is a really fascinating read. So it's not a full review, it's just a heads up. It's only very recently been published, I think late last year, 2022. It's actually got 2021 in as a publication year, so a bit older than I thought, but a really, really good book. I'll be giving a series of kind of heads up in terms of the books I really love to read. This one's published by Princeton University Press. It's a really lovely book. I've got this in Kindle version, this hardcover version, and also the audiobook version, which is really good. So follow the link in the description below, which will take you to the sales page for this book, where you can have a look. And I'll also link to his other books, Tony Sinclair's other books, because they're really, really fascinating. And now I'm going to go birding. So there really ought to be more around kind of early May, bird-wise, but there's not been a great deal these last few days. So I think I've done enough birding. This is the, we're in Ventnor on the Isle of Wight, as usual. This is the terrace of the Royal Hotel. just on the west side of Ventnor Bay. It's a public kind of open area where I love to do counting visible migrants in the spring and autumn. There's a Ventnor Bay over there, try and get it level. Very nice. Fog bank coming in. It's quite humid today. And just over there, if I can get it in, there's Ventnor Downs, Coombe Bottom and Ventnor itself. So there's not much around, so I'm going to head down there and get a coffee. Before I get a coffee, do leave some comments in the comments section below if there are any books you think people ought to read relating to kind of conservation science as it relates to rewilding, particularly trophic rewilding, which is all about the kind of attempting to reinstate as far as possible kind of intact predator-prey communities. So yeah, if you know of any really nice books on trophic rewilding, whether they're books directly about that subject or books directly relevant to that subject, let me know in the comments section. I'll try and get a copy and do a review. I haven't done a review of Tony Sinclair's book yet because I'm still reading it a second time. I like to read it a couple of times before I do a full review. I'm spending too much time birding as well and writing, although there's nothing around, so I might spend more time writing than birding for the rest of today. Anyway, ciao.